The day began like any other in New York. The sky was overcast, and the humid air foreshadowed an imminent storm. I, a successful middle-aged executive, walked hurriedly through the busy streets of Manhattan, balancing a cup of coffee in one hand and my smartphone in the other. My mind was focused on the important business meeting that would happen soon, barely noticing the world around me. As I entered the imposing glass and steel skyscraper, I felt a slight twinge in my chest. I ignored it, attributing it to stress and caffeine. The elevator took me to the 50th floor, where the meeting room awaited. I greeted my colleagues with a forced smile, trying to disguise the growing discomfort. The presentation began, and I forced myself to concentrate on the spreadsheets and graphs projected on the screen. But the pain in my chest increased with each minute. Cold sweat trickled down my temples, and my vision began to blur. I tried to stand up, but my legs weakened. "Is everything okay?" My assistant's worried voice seemed to come from far away. I couldn't answer. The pain exploded in my chest as if a giant fist was crushing my heart. I fell to the floor, gasping, as panic spread through the room. Alarmed voices shouted for help. But to me, everything began to feel distant and muffled. My consciousness seemed to float out of my body. I saw myself lying on the floor, surrounded by frightened faces. Paramedics arrived, urgently applying cardiopulmonary resuscitation. I wanted to tell them I was fine, that I was right there, but no sound came from me. Gradually, the scene in the meeting room disappeared, giving way to absolute darkness. The silence was deafening. There was no more pain, just a feeling of emptiness and disorientation. I tried to move, but I had no body. I was just pure consciousness floating in an infinite vacuum. Suddenly, I felt an intense cold envelop me. It was as if every particle of my being was freezing. I began to see shapes around me, indistinct shadows moving in the darkness. I tried to call out to them, but I had no voice. Then I heard whispers, familiar voices, but distorted, as if they were speaking underwater. I recognized my mother's voice, who had passed away years ago, calling my name. My father, who had left when I was a child, seemed to be there too. Their voices mixed in a confused cacophony, making my being vibrate with a mixture of fear and expectation. Where am I? I thought, without really forming words. Is this what it's like to die? As if answering my silent question, a blinding flash appeared in the distance. It was as if the very fabric of reality had torn, revealing a light that didn't belong to this world. The light approached, taking the form of an ethereal figure. I couldn't distinguish features, but I felt a powerful and benevolent presence. The figure extended what seemed to be a hand, inviting me to follow. I hesitated, torn between fear of the unknown and irresistible curiosity. When I finally touched the luminous hand, I was swept away by a whirlwind of sensations. Images, sounds, and emotions flooded me. I saw flashes of my life, moments of joy, sadness, triumph, and failure. I saw faces of people I loved and strangers whose lives I had touched without knowing. The whirlwind of memories and sensations was so intense that I lost all sense of time and space. I didn't know if a second or an eternity had passed in that state. Gradually, the visions began to calm, and I found myself before an immense portal. The portal emanated an energy that made my being tremble. Beyond it, I glimpsed a scenario that defied comprehension. It seemed like a place of torment and darkness, but also of revelation and truth. I understood, without anyone telling me, that I was about to witness something few mortals had seen. The luminous figure beside me spoke, its voice resonating not in my ears, but throughout my entire essence. Are you ready to see the truth beyond the veil? Without words, just with the intention of my being, I nodded. The portal opened completely, and I was enveloped by a reality that would forever change my understanding of the world, faith, and existence itself. As I crossed the threshold, a certainty took hold of me. Nothing would be the same. Whatever I was about to witness on the other side of that infernal portal would be the catalyst for a profound and irreversible transformation in my soul. As I crossed the portal, I was immediately enveloped by a suffocating atmosphere. The air was dense, laden with an oppressive heat that seemed to penetrate every fiber of my being. The darkness was almost palpable, interrupted only by occasional flashes of a sinister reddish light. My senses, though no longer physical, were on high alert. The smell of sulfur and burnt ashes invaded my perception, making me feel nauseous, even without a real body. The initial silence was soon broken by sounds that chilled me to the core. Groans of anguish, screams of despair, and laments that seemed to come from all directions. I tried to orient myself in this hostile environment, but the landscape seemed to change constantly. I glimpsed steep cliffs, bottomless abysses, and desolate plains, all shrouded in a dark and sticky mist. It was then that I saw them for the first time. Human figures, or what remained of them, wandering aimlessly. Their bodies were distorted shadows, emanating an aura of suffering so intense that it made my essence writhe with compassion and horror. I approached a group of these beings and, with a shock of recognition, realized they were jihadists. Their faces, once full of fury and conviction, were now contorted in expressions of remorse and agony. They seemed trapped in an endless cycle of reliving their past actions, confronting the consequences of every choice they had made in life. One of them, a young man who appeared to be no more than 20 years old, desperately tried to climb a rocky wall, as if seeking escape. But the more he struggled, the more the wall seemed to grow, keeping him eternally trapped in his futile attempt to flee. Another, an older man with a long gray beard, was on his knees, shouting at the obscured sky, begging for mercy. His words were a confused mixture of prayers and lamentations, revealing the internal struggle between his corrupted faith and the belated realization of his mistakes. As I observed these scenes of torment, I felt a presence beside me. Turning, I saw the spiritual figure that had guided me here. Its light contrasted strongly with the surrounding darkness, like a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. "What you see is not punishment, but consequence," said the figure, its voice echoing in my mind. "Each soul here is facing the truth of their actions, free from the illusions and justifications that blinded them in life." I looked again at the jihadists, now with a new perspective. They were no longer fearsome figures, but lost souls, each struggling with their own personal hell. "Why am I seeing this?" I asked, my voice trembling with the emotion of the scene before me. "You are here to understand the true meaning of divine justice," replied the guide. "What humans often interpret as punishment is, in fact, a process of learning and spiritual growth. Each soul here has the opportunity to recognize their mistakes and evolve." As he spoke, I noticed that some of the souls seemed brighter than others. They moved with more purpose, as if they were beginning to find a path amidst the chaos. Those who begin to understand the true nature of love and compassion start their journey of redemption, explained the guide, following my gaze. Suddenly, I felt an invisible force pulling me back to the portal. I fought against it, feeling there was more to see, more to understand. "I can't go yet," I protested. "There's so much to learn here." The guide smiled gently. "Your journey is just beginning. What you have seen here is only the first step of a much greater revelation." As I was led back to the portal, I cast one last look at the tormented souls. A mixture of compassion, fear, and determination formed within me. I knew that what I had witnessed would forever change my understanding of life, death, and what comes after. I crossed the portal, my mind full of questions and my heart heavy with the responsibility of the knowledge I had acquired. The hell I had seen was not a place of eternal punishment, but a realm of confrontation and potential transformation. And I knew that my own journey of transformation was just beginning. As I crossed the portal back, I found myself in an intermediate space, neither the hell I had just witnessed, nor the world of the living. It was a place of ethereal calm, where light and darkness merged into a serene twilight. The spiritual figure that had guided me remained by my side, its presence radiating ancient and compassionate wisdom. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice echoing in the void around us. The figure smiled, a gesture that conveyed both love and sadness. I am a guide, sent to help souls like yours understand the truths beyond the veil of mortal existence. My purpose is to teach a lesson of reconciliation and truth. I nodded, still processing everything I had seen. Those souls, the jihadists, they seemed so lost, so tormented. Is this the fate of all who commit acts of violence in the name of faith? The guide made a sweeping gesture with its hand, and visions of the tormented souls appeared around us, like ethereal holograms. Each of these souls was seduced by a false promise of glory. They believed they were serving a divine purpose, but in reality, they were being manipulated by distorted interpretations of sacred texts and by leaders with political agendas. I observed the images, noticing the anguish on each face. Is there a possibility of redemption for them? Redemption is always possible, replied the guide, its voice soft but firm. But each soul must confront its own mistakes, recognize the evil it has caused, and genuinely seek forgiveness and change. It's not an easy or quick process. One of the images drew closer, showing a middle-aged man kneeling in prayer, tears running down his face. This man, explained the guide, has sincere faith, but his faith was corrupted by a lack of love and compassion. He is beginning to understand that true devotion is not in acts of violence, but in acts of kindness. I remained silent for a moment, reflecting on my own beliefs and actions. How did they reach this point? What prevents them from redeeming themselves more quickly? The guide nodded, and the images changed, showing scenes of poverty, war, and oppression. Many were victims of terrible circumstances. They grew up in environments of hatred and fear, where violence seemed to be the only answer. Others were attracted by the promise of power and purpose. What prevents them from redeeming themselves is the attachment to old beliefs, the fear of admitting they were wrong, and the difficulty of forgiving themselves. I felt a wave of compassion for these lost souls. So, what is the path to true faith? The guide smiled again, this time with a glimmer of hope in its eyes. True faith, in any religion, is based on love and compassion, not on rigid dogmas or literal interpretations of ancient texts. It's about connecting with the divine through kindness towards all beings, not just those who share your beliefs. Its words resonated deeply within me, making me question my own spiritual journey. I realized that, although I wasn't an extremist, my own faith often lacked true compassion. I followed rituals and rules, but rarely extended myself beyond my immediate circle to help others. I'm beginning to understand, I said, feeling a mixture of humility and determination growing inside me. My own spiritual journey was incomplete. I thought I was on the right path, but now I see there's much more to learn and do. The guide placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that conveyed comfort and encouragement. This recognition is the first step in a journey of transformation. You were brought here not just to witness, but to learn and grow. The images around us began to fade, and I felt our time was coming to an end. What should I do now? I asked, eager for direction. Return to the world of the living with this knowledge, replied the guide. Share the message of love and compassion. Show others that true faith doesn't divide, but unites. And remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change the world. As the space around us began to dissolve, one last question arose in my mind. Will I see you again? The guide smiled mysteriously. I am always present for those who seek the truth with an open heart. Your journey is just beginning, and there's much more for you to learn and experience. With these words, the world around me disappeared in a whirlwind of light and energy. I felt myself being pulled back to physical reality, my mind full of new insights and my heart overflowing with renewed purpose. As awareness of my physical body began to return, I knew that nothing would be the same. The conversation with the spiritual guide had planted seeds of change in my soul, seeds that I was determined to nurture and share with the world. As my consciousness oscillated between the spiritual realm and the physical world, The guide's words echoed in my mind. The notion of divine justice I had witnessed was profoundly different from everything I had believed before. It wasn't punitive justice, but restorative justice, focused on learning and spiritual growth. Again, I found myself in that liminal space, neither fully in the spiritual world, nor completely back in my physical body. The guide remained by my side, its presence a comforting anchor amidst the vastness of the unknown. "What you've seen so far is just the beginning," said the guide, its voice gentle, but full of undeniable authority. "Now, I will show you how true divine justice operates." With a gesture, the scenery around us changed. We were back in what appeared to be hell, but this time, I could see beyond the surface of suffering. I observed the souls of the jihadists more closely and noticed something surprising. Some of them were beginning to emit a soft glow. "What's happening to them?" I asked, marveling at the transformation. "You are witnessing the power of sincere repentance and true understanding," explained the guide. "These souls are beginning to comprehend the impact of their actions and the nature of universal love. It's the first step towards redemption." I watched fascinated as one of the souls, a man who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, fell to his knees. Tears of understanding streamed down his ethereal face as he murmured words of repentance and pleaded for forgiveness. "See how the light within him grows," pointed out the guide. "Each realization, each genuine act of repentance feeds that light. This is how divine justice works. Not through eternal punishment, but through the opportunity for growth and transformation." As we watched, other souls began to show similar signs of change. Some seemed to struggle more, trapped in cycles of denial or anger. But even in them, I could see occasional sparks of light trying to emerge. "Remember," continued the guide, "here, true intention matters more than the past. It's not about how long a soul spends in this state, but about the depth of its transformation." At that moment, I understood that the true pain in hell wasn't physical, but a profound agony of conscience. It was the torment of facing one's own actions, of seeing the suffering caused, of feeling the weight of each wrong choice. "But what about those who don't repent?" I asked, noticing some souls that seemed to stubbornly resist any change. The guide sighed, a sound full of infinite compassion. "They will remain here until they are ready to face the truth. But divine love is patient and eternal. No soul is beyond redemption, no matter how long it may take." As we spoke, one of the souls began to shine intensely, its light growing until it almost blinded the vision. With a sigh of relief and joy, the soul seemed to dissolve, disappearing from the infernal scene. "Where did it go?" I asked, amazed. "That soul has found peace," replied the guide with a smile. "It fully understood its actions, truly repented, and is ready to continue its spiritual journey on another plane." You see, the cycle of suffering is not eternal for those who truly learn and evolve. I remained silent for a moment, absorbing everything I had witnessed. The magnitude of divine mercy and love I was witnessing was overwhelming. The guide then turned to me, its eyes penetrating deep into my soul. "And what about you?" it asked softly. "What has this experience taught you about your own journey?" I felt as if a mirror had been placed before me, reflecting not just my external appearance, but every thought, every action, every moment of my life. I saw my own flaws, my prejudices, the times I failed to show compassion or understanding. I also need to change," I admitted, feeling a mixture of humility and determination grow within me. "I have much to learn about true compassion and unconditional love." The guide nodded, a gentle smile on its face. "We all do. This is the beauty of existence, the constant opportunity to grow, to love more deeply, to understand more fully. You have a second chance, an opportunity to transform your life and positively impact the world around you." As the scenery began to fade, I felt a profound sense of peace and purpose envelop me. I knew I was about to return to the world of the living, but now I carried with me an understanding that would forever change the way I viewed life death, justice, and love. Remember, said the guide, its voice already beginning to fade away. True heaven and true hell begin in our hearts and in our actions. Go and be a beacon of compassion and understanding in the world. With these words echoing in my mind, I felt myself being pulled back to physical consciousness, ready to begin my new journey with a transformed heart and a renewed mission. The return to consciousness was gradual, like emerging from a deep dream. Slowly, I became aware of the sounds around me. The rhythmic beep of machines, muffled voices, the soft whisper of curtains being moved. I opened my eyes, blinking against the fluorescent hospital light. My family was around me, faces marked by fatigue and relief. My wife, Amira, held my hand, silent tears streaming down her face. Our children, Zayn and Layla, were standing next to the bed, eyes wide with concern. Alhamdulillah, whispered Amira, kissing my hand. We thought we had lost you. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Zayn quickly offered me water, and after a few sips, I managed to find my voice. How long? I asked, my voice hoarse. 3 days, replied Layla, her voice trembling slightly. You had a severe heart attack. The doctors, they weren't sure if you would wake up. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the reality of what had happened sink in. 3 days. It seemed like an eternity and an instant at the same time. The experience I had had, hell, the jihadists, the spiritual guide, everything seemed so vivid, so real. Had it been just a dream, a hallucination caused by the proximity of death? But deep in my heart, I knew the truth. What I had experienced was real, more real than anything I had ever lived before. And now, back in the world of the living, I knew I had a mission to fulfill. In the days that followed, as I recovered in the hospital, I spent a lot of time reflecting on my experience. I talked with the hospital imam, a gentleman named Yusuf, who visited me regularly. Imam Yusuf, I said during one of his visits, what does the Quran say about mercy and compassion? The imam smiled, his eyes shining with wisdom. The Quran teaches us that Allah is the most merciful, the most compassionate. He calls us to be instruments of His mercy in the world. I nodded, feeling a deep resonance with these words. And what about those who follow different paths? Those of other religions or without religion? The Quran tells us, there is no compulsion in religion, replied Yusuf. Our task is to show the beauty of Islam through our actions, not force others to follow our path. These conversations reaffirmed what I had learned in my near-death experience. True Islam, I realized, was about compassion, justice, and peace. Not about judgment or condemnation, but about love and understanding. As I recovered physically, I felt an internal transformation happening. My faith, which was previously based on rituals and rigid rules, began to deepen. I started to see beyond the formalities, seeking the essence of love and kindness in each teaching. When I finally was discharged from the hospital, I returned home with a renewed purpose. My family immediately noticed the change. Dad, you seem different, Zayn commented one day as we sat in the garden. I smiled, pulling him close. The experience I went through showed me many things, son. I learned that life is precious and that each moment is an opportunity to show love and compassion. I began to make changes in my daily life. I started dedicating more time to volunteering in the local community, helping needy families regardless of their faith or origin. I initiated dialogues with leaders of other religions, seeking common ground and ways to promote peace and mutual understanding. In my work, I made decisions that prioritized ethics and employee well-being, even when it meant sacrificing profits. Surprisingly, these decisions ended up strengthening the company in the long term, attracting talents and clients who valued a more conscious approach to business. My wife, Amira, observed these changes with a mixture of surprise and admiration. One night, as we sat on our porch, watching the stars, she held my hand. You've changed, she said softly. It's as if you found a peace you never had before. I gently squeezed her hand. I've seen beyond the veil, Amira. I've seen what really matters. And now, all I want is to live each day spreading love and understanding. In the months that followed, I dedicated myself to writing about my experience and the lessons I had learned. I decided it was my mission to share this message of love, compassion, and unity with the world. I knew I would face skepticism and even rejection from some more conservative sectors of the community. But I also knew that there were many hearts yearning for a deeper and more inclusive spirituality. As I prepared to share my story with the world, I felt a deep inner peace. The near-death experience had not been the end, but the beginning of a new journey. A journey of love, compassion, and the search for the true essence of faith. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, I took the first steps in my new mission, ready to face the challenges that would come and eager to spread the light I had discovered in the depths of darkness. The weeks following my recovery were a period of intense reflection and action. I began to share my experience with ever-widening circles, first with close friends, then with members of my local mosque, and finally through lectures and workshops open to the community. The initial reaction was mixed. Some received my story with fascination and openness, seeing in it an opportunity to deepen their own spiritual understanding. Others, however, reacted with skepticism and even hostility. One Friday afternoon, after Jumu'ah prayer, I was approached by Sheikh Ahmad, one of the most respected and conservative leaders in our community. "Brother," he said, his tone a mixture of concern and disapproval, "your words are causing confusion among the faithful. Speaking of hell as a place of redemption, this goes against our traditional interpretations." I took a deep breath, seeking the calm and compassion I had learned on my journey. "Sheikh Ahmad," I replied, "I deeply respect your position and knowledge. But what I experienced showed me that Allah's mercy is greater than we can imagine. I'm not denying the teachings of the Quran, but rather proposing that we view them through the lens of love and compassion." The Sheikh shook his head, displeased. "You're walking on a dangerous path, my brother. I fear your ideas may lead people away from the straight path." Despite the growing tension with some more conservative members of the community, I found a surprising number of people who resonated with my message. A group of young Muslims, in particular, began to meet regularly with me to discuss spirituality, compassion, and the role of Islam in the modern world. Zara, a 22-year-old university student, expressed the sentiment of many during one of these meetings. "Your words give us hope. They show that we can be faithful to our religion and still embrace a more inclusive and compassionate view of the world." Inspired by this support, I decided to found an organization called Bridges of Light, dedicated to promoting interfaith dialogue and active compassion in the community. We organized events that brought together people of different religions for open discussions and community service projects. One of these events was an interfaith dinner during Ramadan, where we invited members of various religious communities to break the fast with us. It was a powerful night, full of sincere conversations and deep connections. Rabbi David, one of the participants, shared his impressions. "What you're doing here is revolutionary. You're showing that faith can be a force for unity, not division." However, not everyone viewed our activities favorably. Some conservative religious leaders began to speak openly against me, accusing me of leading people away from true Islam. The tension reached its peak during a public lecture I gave about my near-death experience. In the middle of the presentation, a group of protesters entered the room, shouting accusations of heresy and blasphemy. For a moment, I felt fear. But then, I remembered the lessons I had learned, the infinite compassion I had witnessed. Calmly, I addressed the protesters. "Brothers and sisters," I said, my voice firm but gentle, "I understand your fear and your anger. I too once feared the unknown, the different. But what I've learned is that Allah's love is big enough to embrace all of us in our diversity. I invite you to sit with us, to listen and share. For it is in dialogue that we find truth." To my surprise, some of the protesters hesitated, clearly touched by my words. Others left, still furious, but most stayed, curious to hear more. This incident, although frightening, served to strengthen my determination. I realized that the path I had chosen would not be easy, but it was necessary. Each challenge was an opportunity to practice the compassion and understanding that I preached. In the months that followed, bridges of light grew, attracting members from diverse backgrounds, all united by the desire to create a more compassionate and understanding world. We developed educational programs, community service initiatives, and dialogue groups that began to have a real impact in the community. One night, as I reflected on everything that had happened, I received an unexpected message. It was from one of the protesters who had interrupted my lecture months before. "Assalamu alaikum," the message said. "I don't agree with everything you say, but your words about compassion and dialogue made me rethink many things. I'd like to talk more if you're willing." I smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude and hope. It was a small step, but a significant one. I realized that my journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. With a heart full of purpose, I replied to the message, ready for another dialogue, another opportunity to build bridges and spread the light I had discovered on my extraordinary journey beyond the veil.